Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this 30-minute interview tips and how to prepare for your MBA session. I'm going to start things off with just introductions, and then we'll get straight into the tips. Just to give you a quick background, if you haven't attended any of our 30-minute tip sessions before, or if this is your first time, these are quick hits to give you tips, and we are recording this session, so you can rewatch it later if you are on here live with us. But we will not be taking time to answer any questions. Since this is so quick, it goes by very, the 30 minutes goes by very quickly. So I encourage you to attend our office hours if you do have questions that you want to follow up with. Those take place every Wednesday. So let me quickly introduce myself. My name is Taya. I'm a Senior Associate Director of Admissions, have read a lot of interview reports and interviewed a few candidates over the years. So excited to give you these tips. I will turn things over to Michael.
Hey everybody, glad you're joining us. My name is Michael Lippert. I'm another one of the Senior Associate Directors of Admissions here. For those of you invited to interview in round one and got some good news this week, congrats early, and we're excited to learn more about your experiences through the interview.
All right, and it looks like we have Sujin here to introduce herself.
All right, good afternoon, morning, evening, everyone. Excited for all of you to join us and hear some tips from the team. I'm the Managing Director of the Full-Time MBA program at Admissions, and so we're going to share some insights about the interview process as well as how you can get prepared for the MBA after you get in. All right, back to Taya.
All right, let me just get into presentation mode and I will kick things off here. So the first thing I want to do is go through kind of what the invitations look like and what to expect. So we send our interviews by invitation only and in waves. So if you're applying in round one, we have sent all of the non-consortium application interview invitations at this point. And if you're applying in round two, we typically send 1 or 2 waves of interview invitations, and we'll email you shortly after you apply, about a week after you apply, to give you a general time frame of when to expect those interview invitations. The interviews are all 40 minutes long. They're behavioral based, so you don't have to worry about casing or preparing for that. They're all about your experiences and completely based off of your background. The interviews, we like to call them as semi-blind because for the most part, your interviewers will not have seen most of your application, but they will have access to your resume. So you do actually get to upload your resume into the scheduling system when you're invited to interview, and that is the only thing that your interviewers will be able to see. And then finally, the interviews for this entire academic year will all be virtual, and they're going to be conducted all with alumni. So you are matched to an alum generally by geographic region. Sometimes it's random depending on what the balance is, but it's not by industry. A lot of times people wonder how you're matched. It's largely random, and we do our best to try to connect you with somebody in a similar time zone or general region. So the next question on the minds of a lot of people, especially those that just got their interview invitation, is how should I prepare? The first thing I will tell you is when you are preparing, there are 3 guaranteed questions that your interviewer will ask. And that is, that's why Ross? Why should you come to Ross? So make sure you know that. I know a lot of you always wonder why we don't ask that in the essays. Here's your chance. And the next question is why MBA? So make sure you know why you're pursuing this, why you're applied, and how an MBA is going to support your career goals. And then why now? Why does it make sense for you to be doing this at this point in time? And demonstrate that you've thought through why this is the appropriate time for you. So make sure you're thinking through those 3 things. Those are the giveaways. So definitely make sure you have those things prepared. The other thing I would say is make sure you know all of your stories. Like your interviewer is going to have your resume, but they don't know all the color between those bullet points. So make sure you know what differentiates you, what stands out about you in particular. and really think about the stories that you want to tell, or the things that you're most proud of about your experiences, or that are unique that other candidates might not have to share. A lot of times at this stage, once you're an MBA, you're going to learn how to share your stories very concisely and using specific formats. But a little tip for you now, if you can start to prepare your responses in terms of the CAR format. So it's context, action, and then results. That's going to really help you use a good framework for doing your responding to the interview questions in an effective way that is going to impress your interviewers. So if you think about the context of telling them exactly what the situation was for the story that you're telling, what you did, the action, and then what was the result, that's really a strong way to be sharing all of your stories in the interview. I'll turn things over to Michael. I think you might have a few other tips. I think you're on mute, Michael.
Yeah, I'll share a few things that I've seen over the years that I think are really helpful for folks. One is, as Taya mentioned, we don't necessarily match you with somebody who had a very similar background as you. It might be somebody from a completely different industry. And I think something that, when you're interviewing, that takes a little bit of practice, because this isn't a job interview in the field that you've been working in for a bunch of years, is thinking about some of the jargon in your industry, right? Or some of the ways that you describe your work. So some examples that are particularly tricky are consultants who work with clients that they might not be able to identify specifically, or military candidates who are working in highly classified situations or have really unique backgrounds with lots of jargon. So, or bankers with highly quantitative financial subjects. So being able to explain your stories and explain the impacts of your work without using certain jargon, or in a way that somebody from a completely different field can really relate to and understand, is really important. And it might take a little bit of practice. So maybe rehearsing a story or two with somebody from a completely different background than yours could be really helpful as you prepare for that. It's actually really impressive when you're able to do that successfully. Another one I think about is there's probably just a few buckets of things we pay extra special attention to in an interview, because there's not enough data points in the application itself to sometimes get some of these things through. And one of them is like your leadership examples, right? So you might have touched on them in your essays, or we might hear about it from your recommender, but really emphasizing opportunities from your work where you took leadership on a project, or you really delivered some results and made an impact on the business. Those are things you really want to highlight for us. And another is the Ross experience is highly, highly collaborative. So situations where you work cross-functionally, or we're able to work with a different team and achieve really great results, those make for really compelling interview stories. I'd also add another thing we don't ask specifically in the application is about your extracurricular experiences. So maybe some nonprofits that you've been involved in, or when you led clubs during your undergrad experience. You can use some of those stories as part of your answers to the behavioral questions in interviews, and they can be really strong answers, especially if they talk to some of those skill sets. The last thing I'll mention is the interview is a two-way street, right? So we're interviewing you to make sure you're a great fit for Ross, but we want you to absolutely be sure that Ross is the right fit for you. And so I think it's really important for you to prepare some questions that are really thoughtful questions, right? The alum interviewing you had a great experience. That's why they volunteer their time to interview you and enjoy doing it. They want to talk about their Ross experience. They may not be the best question to ask about whether using a test waiver is going to impact their final decision, or how scholarships are determined, but they're great people to talk about their career path, or what clubs were their favorite, or what they liked about Ann Arbor. So really give some thought to those questions, because your interviewer is going to give you space to do that. And it's a really important part of the interview. I think we also have some tactical tips to share with the group. Yeah, so just a couple of things to think about is, confirming your interview with your alum. Obviously, we're all living in this virtual world, and everybody has some different virtual preferences. Some of us like Zoom, some of us like Google Hangout. There's lots of different virtual platforms to use. So make sure that you're confirming your interview with your alum and the platform and the time. But also keep in mind that the alumni interviewing you has a very busy career and lots going on. So just be a little bit patient. If you don't hear back instantly from an alum, just give them a couple of days to get back to you and confirm some of those details. Obviously, this is a professional interview, so the alum is not going to ask you to stand up and show your full-length body, but I would recommend dressing professionally and taking this as a professional interview experience. And so keep that in mind, even in the virtual format. And then being aware of your background, right? We've all joked about different backgrounds that we like or are memorable. Some of us follow the Room Raider account on Twitter. I know that's a highly enjoyable thing for people in this virtual world. But keep in mind, pets and kids and things going on can be really, really distracting during a professional interview. So as much as possible, just sort of get your space ready and keep things like that in mind. And then making eye contact is really important. We were pretty surprised last year at just how many interviewers talked about folks who seemed to be just sort of reading their notes from another screen or looking down the whole time. It was really hard to have that conversational interview experience if you're not making eye contact with the camera. And it actually takes some practice. So like I've had to get better at staring at that little camera on the top of my laptop over the past year, but it's definitely something that I think enhances the interview experience. And then a final tip to keep in mind is really stay engaged after the interview. So what do I mean by that is two things kind of. One is we have a lot of programming specifically for round one or for folks invited to interview. So there are special mock classes or other events where you can continue learning about the Ross experience. You're off the hot seat, but most of you are going to get good news that you were admitted, right? And it's going to be a tough decision to make. So keep learning about Ross. And the second way I mean it, also to keep in mind is after you're admitted, everybody's going to be nice to you, right? Or everybody's going to get back to you. I think it's a really helpful insight and good way to think about things is what kinds of feelings do I have about a school, or a good way to compare apples to apples before you sort of get to that admitted student stage. So take advantage of that.
So we're very enthusiastic and hopeful for all of you that you're going to get into all of the schools that you apply to and interview with. And so we want to share just a few tips on what you can do, even starting now as you're preparing for business school, because that is the plan that you'll be starting next fall. So I wanted to share some tips for you to be successful as an MBA student next fall that you can start enacting now. First thing is that you can prepare academically. Many students these days come from non-quantitative backgrounds or non-business backgrounds. And so when they get to business school, they find it very challenging to engage in the quantitative courses. Our first quarter, for example, you're going to have economics, statistics, accounting, and strategy. That's 3 quant courses in 7 weeks. And so that's going to be pretty intense for people who don't have that kind of background. So you can take an online course or pick up a book on any one of those topics to help you get familiar with the language, the concepts. You can take a course or just familiarize yourself. It's just going to help you once you start classes, especially if you don't have a quantitative background. Many schools like Ross do have some refresher courses or some prep courses in some of these quantitative areas, but they're at different levels of depth and intensity. So it behooves you to, if you don't have a quantitative background, to get prepared in advance of that. And then for international students whose native language is not English, we encourage you to practice your English speaking, reading, listening skills, because everything happens so quickly between recruiting and classes, and all of it is going to be done in English as if you come to a school in the US. And so it will help you ease into the academic and recruiting experience if you start practicing your English speaking skills more frequently. Next slide. You can also start to develop your career plan. You've done some of that through your application, and you'll certainly need to have a pretty good idea for your interview, the why MBA being the primary question for which you'll need to know what your career goal is. We've got a lot of resources for you. We have career webinars for incoming students that cover industry, function, and alumni panels for all of the industries and functions that you might be interested in. We'll also have one-on-one appointments with career coaches over the summer. But between now and then, we encourage you to do a lot of exploration about what you want to do when you grow up. Have a plan A and a plan B, because you may find that the plan A is actually not as interesting to you as you thought. So have a plan B. We encourage all of our incoming students to have 2 tracks. And then over the summer, we'll help prepare you through a very intensive summer recruiting prep course, which will have lots of virtual modules that you'll have to get done, all of those modules. So you'll be ready to hit the ground running once recruiters start talking to students, some of them over the summer, lots of them during the fall, and it'll hit pretty quickly. So there are a lot of things you can do even before you're a student to help you be successful as a student. Other things that we, and I assume other schools will do to help onboard you to becoming an MBA student, we'll have a lot of webinars around student clubs, what you might want to join, get involved in. We'll have community building events, one-on-one connection making, and small group events virtually. You're going to have some pre-work for orientation. So be prepared for that. A lot of students are like, what? I thought school doesn't start until the fall. Guess what? We have a lot of things over the summer to help you be successful in the fall. And more things are happening earlier. Even the recruiting process, our students are finding that it's earlier than ever before. So it will help you out to stay on top of all these things. And finally, one of the things that we do very well at Ross is leadership development. And we're going to have elements of the leadership development journey happening over the summer too. But most of all, between now and then, before you start your MBA, we also want you to relax, don't stress. It's going to be a great experience. Save up money, because guess what? MBAs do a lot of traveling. Our students are on fall break now, and they are in far-flung places like Greece, Croatia, Colombia, Costa Rica, and they love going on these trips with each other. So save money. And if you wanted to travel, don't worry. The MBA is going to give you lots of opportunities to do just that with people that you're excited to travel with. And that concludes our tips.
Yeah, so there's our tips for interviews and getting ready for Ross. Thanks everyone for attending. And like I said, if you still have questions, please attend our office hours that take place every Wednesday. Good luck with your interviews.